minutes, they will be debating the issues raised to us by our membership and the public. Tonight, these will include public safety, housing, addiction, the environment, homelessness, and taxes. Each topic will have one question, which was predetermined by our planning committee, and one follow-up question based on the candidates' responses tonight. For the initial question, the first candidate to answer will have 2 minutes to respond. Each of the other candidates will have 1 minute. Following the final candidate's response, the first candidate will have 1 minute to rebut the other candidate's responses. After the rebuttal, the follow-up question will be posed to a different candidate, who will then have 90 seconds to respond. Each of the other candidates will have 30 seconds, and following the final candidate's response, the first candidate will have 30 seconds to rebut the other candidate's responses. On the final topic tonight, a discussion of taxes, it will follow the same structure. However, during the initial question, each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond, followed by a 2-minute rebuttal from the first candidate to answer. We ask that our audience be respectful of the candidates and refrain from applauding, cheering, jeering, and booing throughout the event. We will begin tonight giving each candidate 1 minute to introduce themselves, starting with Phil Tappan.
Jordan, thank you very much. Thank you to the 34th, and thank you to the West Seattle Blog, and thank you to all of you to come out tonight, because the fact is, this is an incredibly important election, and you need to pay attention. You need to come and listen to all of us and see what your choices are, because the fact is, Seattle can do better. We need change. We are heading in the wrong direction on so many issues, and we need someone in office that has the ability to problem solve. Someone that brings a list of skills and experiences that can add a new, fresh sense of idea of what we do. We need to adjust problems. We need to address problems with the criminal justice system. We need to be more supportive of our police. We need to be supportive of our businesses and our communities and work cooperatively. And we need to reach out. We have a city council that hasn't been listening. They have not been spending the time to talk to people and understand what our community wants. And I am running for city council to change that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank you. Thank you everybody for coming out tonight. It's such an honor to be here at Holy Family. About 10 years ago, I was on the board of a service organization called Amici, and we actually partnered with Holy Family and did some service projects here. So it's been 10 years since I was first in this room, and it's really quite an honor to be back. As I try to make the argument that I am very well suited to represent you and address some serious issues we have in Seattle on City Council. Community service is very important to me. I've been involved in service both as a volunteer and professionally, really for most of my life. I believe that, as Mr. Tappan said, we can do better as a city, and I very much look forward to sharing my ideas with you this evening. Thank you.
So my name's Jesse Green, a council member, a attorney, a police officer, and a popcorn guy. I know it sounds like a bad joke, but that's where we're at today. I want to talk to you all about my passions and my experiences, but I can tell you that right now we are at a critical point within this city. I have to ask all of you, how do you feel right now how the city is doing? We really need a city council that is respectful for all the individuals that are here by being very pragmatic with the way that we collect taxes and the way that we spend those. We need to be a city that is welcoming for everyone. Right now, we have an opportunity to make a difference, and I want to ask for all of your vote to bring that opportunity and to be your representative. Thank you.
Problem of not having a table. Greetings, welcome. I'm Lisa Herbal. I think, probably most of your council member. I want to sort of turn this on its end. The problems and challenges that we are facing as a city are problems of prosperity and growth. We have had 40 million visitors to our city in 2018. That is a 9-year running record, more and more people are coming here as part of tourism, and we're also the most quickly growing large city in the nation. And what that means is we have prosperity that not everybody is benefiting from. It means that we really need to focus on making sure that we are addressing these challenges ranging from homelessness to public safety to addiction, and all of the issues that have brought you here tonight. And I think we have a good path forward, but really it's a matter of focusing our resources and our priorities on our greatest challenges and the greatest needs of those with the least. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. And now we'll move into our questions for tonight. Question 1 on public safety is going to be asked to Brendan Colding first, and you'll have 2 minutes to respond. During our forum, you took the position that City Council has failed to support the police department. You stated the city has found itself in competition with neighboring jurisdictions, but does not act as though this is the case, resulting in a rapid outflow of personnel. What policies would you implement to support law enforcement without neglecting the necessity for police accountability and positive community relationships?
Thank you, Jordan. I appreciate that question. This all comes down to having a city council that supports our police department. Our current city council has not been supportive. I could go on for that, but with limited time, we need to look at our police officers and we need to understand that they're human beings who have families, who have the same sort of career aspirations and goals as the rest of us, and not see them as a group of people that we just need to regulate. Accountability is important when there are issues. The city's been very good about dealing with them, but we have officers leaving for other agencies because they don't feel it's worth the risk to their families, to themselves as professionals, if they continue to work in Seattle. We have a city council that voted yes 8-1 in favor of a new contract, but each person who voted in favor did so begrudgingly. My colleague here was the first one to provide her input. At the end, she said, I regretfully must vote yes. That's very telling to the officers in terms of how they're supported. If we have a culture in Seattle that supports law enforcement, officers will stay and other officers will want to come. Currently, it's the opposite. Officers are leaving, they're not telling their friends this is a good place to work, and we are in crisis. We are at lower levels of staffing than we were in the late 60s. And if you think about how many people we've added since then, that's very alarming. Also, SPD has taken on a commitment to more services than we were doing 40 years ago. So to me, this comes down 100% to having a city council that backs officers, that will hold them accountable when they have done something wrong, but will not take an unsupportive posture towards them as professionals. And yes, police officers are professionals. Thank you.
This question really centers around safety. It's one of the primary responsibilities of our city, if we feel safe or not. My conversations with individuals who I've been out in the field, they don't feel safe. They feel like if they go downtown, they're at risk. You all read the West Seattle blog. There's individuals that crime happens all of the time. And it's because we don't have the support of the city council for the police officers. But this is a complex issue. The policing has had to be held accountable for their actions, and they've done a great job at responding to that. And now we need to step up and say, we support you. Your job matters. We need to prosecute the individuals that are arrested. We need to ensure that the police officers know that when they put their life on the line, to put people behind bars, that those people are going to pay the consequences for their actions.
So the true measure of the city council's support for the police officers is really in its budgeting. In the 3.5 years I've been on the council, the police department's budget has grown from $300 million to $400 million. Seattle Police Department officers are the highest paid officers in the region now. And the council council, with passage of the police contract, approved increases of wages from including an additional $50 million for 2019 and another $50 million for 2020, with $40 million in back pay. The statement I made about my vote was because I recognized that I had to make some sacrifices as it relates to the gains that we had accomplished just a year before with our police accountability legislation. In voting for the contract, we were voting to undo some of the things that we had accomplished, but my commitment was to the residents of my district and the need to meet our staffing goals.
The fact is, it's not just about money supporting police. You need to actually be able to praise them. You need to be able to have a city council that doesn't call a police officer a murderer. You need a city council that says, we respect the job you do and we want you to do it. Because the fact is, we're not going to be safe as a citizenry unless we actually have a police force that's capable of policing the city. And it's true, our staffing needs it's ridiculous. I mean, we have grown 60% since our police force was at this level in 1968, and we have not grown with that. And the city continues to grow. We need to address staffing, because if you're overworked, whether it's police or fire, it's the same problem. You don't have that level of support. And the fact is, the police do need to work hand in hand with the entire criminal justice system, which means accountability and transparency. That if a police officer does do something wrong, they're held accountable, but you don't want to bog them down in hours and hours of paperwork for every time they have to use force to make it harder to do their job. Thank you.
The follow-up question will go to Councilmember Herbold. Oh, yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Rebuttal.
Okay. Thank you, Jordan. I will very respectfully present some data that shows how the City Council, including our representative from District 1, has been unsupportive of the police department. November 2016, as budget chair, Councilmember Herbold trimmed $3.3 million from the money allocated to replace the North Precinct, which was built in 1984 and very much needs to be replaced. June of 2017, she sponsored Council Bill 118761, which codified existing department policy on citizen observation of officers to achieve no purpose other than to hold an officer criminally liable should he violate what is currently existing department policy. November of 2017, the council members supported Council Bill 119136, prohibiting the SPD from participating in a Department of Defense program to receive free or reduced cost military equipment, which does nothing other than prevent officers from having more equipment to protect themselves and protect the citizens. Also, our council member endorsed I-940, which also does nothing other than make officers more liable for criminal liability. Thank you.
Follow-up will go to Councilmember Herbold. So funds as a whole have increased for the police department. Still, we struggle to retain and recruit police officers. Do you think there is something additional the council could do? Is praise really where the council is falling short?
So, individual council members aren't responsible for the statements of other council members. I have always been supportive of the police department. The reference to the trimming of the budget for the North Precinct, that project had already been shelved. And as it relates specifically to meeting the staffing goals that we have set out as our commitment to the residents of the city, there are a lot of things that I think our city can do, but we also have to recognize that 80% of large cities are facing recruitment challenges for police officers. That said, one of the things I did earlier this year is I established, working together with the police department, a program that creates community preferences, which is a way of giving people credit who are interested in applying to be a police officer who have bilingual skills. And so this is a way of drawing more people into the police department who might not otherwise think of this being a lifelong career. Other things that the city can work on and has begun to work on, I've been doing a campaign for 3 years to reestablish the city's CSO program, as a community service officers program, and that we are finally now moving into the implementation of council funding from 2 years ago. And that program can also, I think, really allow police officers to focus on the jobs that they signed up for, which is law enforcement jobs, because the CSO program will be taking on some of the responsibilities that police officers are having to address now.
So just to clarify, so it's a minute to respond to. 30 seconds. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I mean, one of the things, obviously, the police contract is one thing where you think that in the 2015 election, we were talking about getting the police contract done, and 3 years into it, that still wasn't done. That is not just on the council, but it shows how our city is failing to work together. And the community service officer program is something that there's been money there for a couple of years, it's just not gotten off the ground, and we do need to work on that, but part of the problem is getting the inaction in the city to move forward to get the things done that we need.
So language preference points on civil service tests don't increase hiring, they simply put people, they increase people's rank on the list. They don't increase the actual amount of people who can get hired. Because you do have to pass the test first. Also, in response to the question as to whether praise is enough, the officers aren't asking for praise. These aren't people who get a trophy every time they leave the office. They just don't want to be criticized. I mean, the bar is relatively low for these professionals. Just let us do our jobs and let us go home at the end of the day.
Well, I would say the bar is actually high for police officers, and it is something that it is tough to bear, but we need to support them. I think to talk about the rebuttal to this is, what do the police officers say? Does the current city council support them? Look at who they're talking about, who they're supporting, the public safety individuals. You can talk about that you support them through money, but support has to be behind them 100%, saying your job matters.
Mr. Colding mentioned my support for an initiative that passed last year. This is an initiative that 70% of the voters supported. It's an initiative that was really focused on de-escalating training for police officers. And although 70% in King County approved it, a very, very large majority also approved of it here in District 1 as well. These are policies that the general public support.
Okay. Question number 2 begins with Jesse Green. You've called for support of affordable housing for everyone, including the middle class. Of the 571 affordable units in District 1, a vast majority are available for folks earning 75 to 90% of the area median income. This income bracket was described in the forum as getting closer to the middle income housing. What would you do to increase the stock of affordable units for middle income households?
Middle income housing is important because that's where we all come into the market. I remember my wife and I, when we first bought our place, I don't mind saying it was $147,000 for a condo off of Fauntleroy. It was an option for us to get our very first starting place, and we were so excited. That's not an option now, though. You're not going to find something that people can just come into the job market. We're also finding that we're pricing individuals on fixed income out of the market through our policies. To make sure that we have affordable housing that everyone can live in, we need to be pragmatic about how we tax individuals. We need to understand that as every time that we raise a fee, whether it even be a parking fee or income tax or any type of fee that goes towards housing, it's pricing people out of the market. We need to be better stewards of our economic policy, especially when it comes towards creating opportunity for additional housing. Right now, it takes forever to get your project permitted. It takes a long time. The DPD, which I know it's not called that anymore, I forget, they always change their name, but when we went to go get a mother-in-law, it took over a year before we could even get an answer back. How can you add additional units that people can actually afford within this when the permitting process is so long, when it's so expensive to get your permitting? And not even that, just to live here. We need to focus on affordable housing, and that doesn't just include the city collecting money and putting it towards a pot towards low income. We need to add additional places for people to live because they want to live here.
I need to apologize. I'm
No,
sorry,
that's
I hit
okay.
the wrong buttons.
That's okay.
16.
So I think the question was specifically about middle-income housing, not affordable housing. But, you know, it's really important to keep in mind that the housing that has been built in this region, 85% of it over the last 10 years has actually been luxury housing. So we have a lot of housing being built at the top, a little bit of housing, affordable housing being built at the bottom, not much in between. And, you know, one of the reasons is simply that for-market developers see that there's a huge benefit to develop the luxury housing. So we really need to figure out how to work with the for-profit market and the banks to figure out how to make it more attractive for them to build this middle-income housing. We can't use city dollars for it. We have a prohibition against the gift of public funds, and we can only use city funds to build low-income housing that is under 80% AMI. But we have other tools. We have tools like the multifamily tax exemption, which makes it more attractive for some for-profit projects to be built. And we also have the MHA upzones that we recently did, which will add capacity to the market.
Well, one of the things with respect to protecting middle-income housing and affordable housing, however you want to call it, is programs like MHA are not set up the right way. They are just upzoning the urban villages. And the fact is, when you put in these upzones, you make it so tempting for developers to come in and purchase older stock. And the fact is, when you tear down something older and you put something new, it doesn't get cheaper. And in terms of for affordability, part of the problem here is our values, the property values just keep skyrocketing. You know, my landlord came to me the other day and showed me that his property tax just went from $3,000 in 2018 to $4,500 in 2019, a 50% increase. And if we just keep pushing development with a program like MHA that doesn't have the developers paying a high enough in lieu of fees so that affordable housing can be created, and we're not protecting the stock that we already have, we're going to lose it. And like Lisa just said, we're building all of this luxury stock because it's all about the money to be made, and we need to protect what we have, and we need rules that are out there that keep the housing affordable.
Thank you. A large part of what allows a middle-income family to live in any city is the entire cost of living. So their housing costs compounded with everything else they have to pay for. Towards that end, we need to make sure our property taxes don't rise to the extent that they price people out of the market, because we all pay either our rent or our mortgage. Property taxes are included in that. So as those rise, the city becomes less affordable for people. The way I understand it, within the current iteration of the MHA is being considered, there's something called the Permanent Affordable Housing Program, which would establish a community trust to leave some middle-income priced homes available within West Seattle. I think that's a very exciting option. I think that's something we need to continue to explore. I hope it gets passed. Also, I think as we look at transit-oriented development, particularly at the junction, we can look at how the cost of a home coupled with the availability of transit downtown makes life just a little more affordable for people.
Yep, you get a minute.
So we do need to add inventory to meet the demand. But you are correct. We are seeing a building of very expensive housing. But let's talk about why that is. When you buy a lot, when lots cost $400,000, $500,000, you have $150,000, $160,000 worth of permitting costs. That's before the construction even starts. Then if you have to carry that loan, if you took hard money, the builders, however they're financing it, if it takes them over a year to build that, the cost of it continues to go up. The economics of this, and this comes from owning a construction company, the economics force those individuals, if they want to make a profit, if they want to pay that good wage, have union jobs on their on-site working on that property. Because of the way our policy, it's forcing us to do this way. This has been mismanagement from the city of this for over a decade.
What is this?
follow-up question I have it'll begin with Phil Talbot. How does a city council member become an economic steward for the city and work in this for-profit development?
Well, the first thing is the city council member does a good job of meeting with all of the different players that are in this process. You need to talk to developers, you need to talk to landlords, you need to talk to tenants, you need to talk to the companies that are having the people move here. And you have to understand what it is to live sometimes paycheck to paycheck. You know, as a public defender, it's true, we are overworked and underpaid. And as I said, my landlord just had to raise my rent $100 a month. And I remember seeing a report a couple of years ago about the current city council being worth several $1 million when you put them all together. And I think part of the problem is they're actually a little out of touch with what it means to make not that much money and to live paycheck to paycheck and to be able to understand what budgeting is like and how do I live where I want to be. I mean, it's one of the issues we have that's leading to homelessness, as we've talked about in this city. But being a good economic steward is about being able to put yourself in the shoes of the other people in your community, to understand the economic forces that are at work, and to be able to listen and pay attention and understand. Because, you know, in a boom time economy, we've got so much going on that is pushing these prices up and up. It's the property taxes, it's the land values, it's the desire for more. And if you don't understand all these bits and pieces, you're going to fall short. You're going to listen to one side too much over another, and you're not going to be able to help the entire situation if you don't understand it all.
Yes. So I believe that the way a council member becomes an economic steward in this respect is to listen to the community. And we're very fortunate in District 1. We have myriad community groups, neighborhood associations, and they are very good about inviting candidates and council members to their meetings. And so you go, you show up, you talk to them, you get to know them, and you go from there. The other thing is you need to admit, if you're not an economist, you need to surround yourself with the right people. You need the right staff, you need the right people advising you, and you need to make sure you're making well-informed decisions.
This is why we need real lived work experience on the council. I appreciate the service of city council members. It's a hard job, but there's something that comes with actually living and running companies, running a construction company and understanding that, working on housing issues and understanding that, being in this place where you're not just part of the bureaucracy, but you're a citizen like the rest of us. We need voices that actually have real world experience and haven't been doing this for their entire careers.
So I think being a good steward of issues related to housing really means understanding the context in which we are having to make these difficult decisions. And I'm going to look at my notes here real quickly because there are 5 different standards. I do work with economists because I am not an expert. And in Washington State, we have the most regressive tax structure in the nation. And we finish last when you consider fairness, transparency, adequacy, stability, and economic vitality. Last in the nation. You have to understand that our challenges in this city are informed by the state.
And you get it up. Yes, 30 seconds.
Yeah. You need a business owner on the city council. You need someone who's signed a paycheck, someone who's been responsible for someone else's livelihood, someone who understands the bottom line and the holistic nature of the fact that when you do one economic thing, it doesn't just stop there, it has other consequences. And if you don't understand that, if you think your actions happen in a vacuum and you can raise a price here or add money here that it doesn't have far-reaching effects, you're wrong. And this is why City Council has to have someone who's been a business owner.
Question 3 is on addiction. In a recent report, which you referenced in our forum, researchers claim a scaled-up supervised injection site in Seattle would cost at least $3 million annually to operate. This excludes construction and maintenance costs. They justify this cost by claiming $1.7 million in annual healthcare expenditures and a cost-benefit ratio of $5.32 for that scaled-up program. It would take 9 of these facilities to meet the demand the researchers claim exists in the city of Seattle. How do you envision the implementation of supervised injection sites in Seattle?
So obviously, the implementation of supervised injection sites is incredibly challenging given the federal government's position on safe injection sites. Safe injection sites, although we call them safe injection sites, are really overdose prevention sites. And they aren't just about preventing deaths and preventing overdoses and preventing trips to the emergency room, but they are also about getting people into treatment. And they are the linkage to treatment. And they are the kinds of services that are provided are the kinds of services that will bring people in. In the absence of being able to implement a safe injection site within the context of the federal government's opposition, we need to really focus on all of the services that a safe injection site or an overdose prevention site would have. So those treatment beds, treatment on demand, medically assisted treatment, as well as looking at the options that are available to really figure out how to encourage people absent a overdose prevention site to access those types of services. I'm not using all my time. But the reality is I don't see the city moving forward, given the fact that we have a local representative of the federal government, of the Department of Justice, who basically is telling us that if we move forward, we will be sued. So I think what the city is planning on doing at this point is looking to see what's happening in Philadelphia, where there is a similar sort of standoff in Philadelphia. They are also really bully on the idea of using this strategy that is used in 100 other cities across the country, in Europe, in Great Britain, in BC, as well as in Australia. So we're going to watch and see what happens in Philadelphia before we move forward, I believe. It's a King County project, that's the other piece.
I mean, obviously, right now, it is a moot issue. It's not something that could be done, and it's not necessarily the right thing to do. What troubles me is the report that Jordan was just referencing, and it talks about this $5.32 ratio between the $3.3 million cost and the money it saves. That's actually based on the fact that they're taking 15-year-old to 69-year-olds who will go to the safe injection site, and that the average King County, the median salary in King County multiplied by those 950 or so people that would go to that site would equal about $16 million. So that it's a 5-to-1 ratio, that they're saving this money because these people have not died, so therefore they're going to be working full-time, and it's going to be at a median King County income. That's absurd. There's also the problem that this report talks about people doing heroin at the age of 15, and it's an age range from 15 to 69 of people going to this place 3 times a week to do heroin, and then are assumed to be working a full-time job. There are just too many issues with that.
I agree that there are too many issues with heroin injection sites. Regardless of what happens in Philadelphia, I do not envision them starting here in Seattle. I think it's obnoxious that we continue to feel like it's appropriate to violate federal law. Heroin is illegal. There's no safe way to inject it into your body. I've said that time and time again, and I truly believe it. I analogize it to having a vehicle crash safe site where you can drive your car into a wall and we'll just fix you afterwards. That makes absolutely no sense. Financially, socially, morally, I'm 100% against safe injection sites, heroin injection sites, however you want to term them. We are better than that in Seattle. We can provide services to people without giving them the opportunity to inject. There's nothing that prohibits that from happening. I cannot emphasize enough how opposed to this I am. If you look at data about what happened in Vancouver, they basically have surrendered part of their city from a safety standpoint to where they have these.
As you go to the lower east side of Vancouver, you do see the results of the safe injection site. And I'm not willing to accept that into our city. Not right now. But we do have an issue. There you might not like to hear it, but we have 15-year-olds doing heroin. This is not acceptable. Treatment on demand is what we really need to be working towards. We need to make sure that we give the tools freely and make them available to anyone that will take them. I know I talked about it last time, but my dad passed away because of his addiction. And until you go through that experience, you may feel hardened inside, but these are people with kids and parents and brothers and sisters. We need to work together, not make this a political issue. We need to work together to ensure that these people get help.
So one of the things I think is important to keep in mind is that the safe injection site, although the city has provided some funding, it's really a King County project, and it's up to King County to identify the 3 locations and site them. And as I mentioned before, I think we are going to be moving forward cautiously given the legal considerations. But I strongly support, I'm going to double down, these are life-saving locations and life-saving services. And like I mentioned before, they save money, but really it's not about the money, it's about saving lives. And if you have somebody that you care about who has overdosed, you know that it's priceless. It's priceless. And the other thing to keep in mind is that 70% of satellites surveyed actually support a safe injection site. And I think it's really in keeping with our values as a city to realize that we have to help save lives. And this is a tool in the toolbox, and I think we should use it.
Wow.
The follow-up question will go to Brendan. If supervised injection sites are not an option, describe your approach to the opioid crisis and how that approach will significantly improve the situation.
Thank you. I believe we do need treatment on demand. We do need to enhance the services we're able to provide. We have a very important tool within state law, RCW 7105-153, paragraph 2, that allows for involuntary treatment for people who are experiencing basically safety concerns. The same situations that would get, that would allow the police to commit them involuntarily for mental health issues, for substance abuse issues, which I'm sorry for garbling that. Basically, the police have the ability to commit someone to treatment involuntarily for up to 72 hours for substance-related safety issues. The caveat, though, is that there has to be a bed for them. They don't have the ability to effect that seizure if there isn't a facility with adequate space. So we need those spaces. Absent the appropriate amount of beds, the police have a law that they can't really enforce. And this isn't a criminal law. This is what's called community caretaking. There are many ways the police do their job and affect seizures under the Fourth Amendment. This is a community caretaking function. It's not criminalizing homelessness or addiction or anything like that. So my response to the question is we need the facilities, and we already have the tools in place to get people to help. If they won't accept it voluntarily, then involuntarily. Because a lot of the feedback I've gotten from people is the involuntary component, being forced to get the treatment they needed, actually saved their lives.
Before you give your response, I just want to remind the audience to remember to be respectful as we move along in this, whether you agree or disagree with the candidate's position or statements. Thank you.
We need to ensure that we do have access to the treatments needed. Ensuring that all public hospitals have a way to administer on demand the services or the opiate blockers or the methadone that someone needs, we need to make that available. But just a quick question here, just so that I know, please raise your hand if you do support safe injection sites, how they currently sit. Okay, thank you.
So involuntary treatment is, it is definitely part of a crisis response. It is one part of a crisis response, and it is really of a last resort. The challenge with involuntary treatment is, as Mr. Holding mentioned, the fact that we need involuntary treatment beds. But even once we have beds, and there is funding in the state legislature's budget for this year, There will be actually one coming on in King County later this year and more funding. But the challenge is what people are only in involuntary treatment for 30 days. It's what happens afterwards. Where do they go afterwards?
One of the things we need to do is we need to make sure that people have Narcan and naloxone to be able to stop those overdoses. This is bus drivers, this is firefighters, this is police, and this is work with Big Pharma to bring the prices down so it can be all over the place. The other thing we have to do is we have to move away from a medical model of detox, and we have to go to a communities model of detox. We need people where they're actually providing hope and support. Getting out of drug addiction takes a lot, and it takes a community. It's hard enough when you've got a family, but when you've got no one around you to help, you're just not going to do it, and that's what we need to do.
Councilmember Herbold makes an excellent point. The question is, what do they do after they're involuntarily treated? That comes into part of the broader scheme. We need the services for them. At some point, people make their own decisions, and the law gives us a certain capacity to control their actions. After that, it's on them. With the appropriate services, with the appropriate resources and beds and medical staff available for people, we can do the best we can. We can certainly improve the situation from where it is now. It starts one step at a time. Thank you.
Okay, question 4 concerning the environment begins with Phil Tapman. Most of the candidates here have stated transportation contributes to 60% of greenhouse gas emissions. According to the EPA, the 60% figure refers to the percentage of transportation emissions produced by on-road traffic. Transportation accounts for 29% of total greenhouse gas emissions, meaning on-road traffic produces 17.4% of total greenhouse gas emissions. How would you direct city resources to address our environmental concerns?
Well, there's a lot of things we can do. I mean, one of the things we definitely need to do is move towards hybrid fleets and electric fleets, regardless of what you're talking about. Police force, these are vehicles that are driving around every day. We need to move towards hybrid vehicles there. The ferry system, in fact, is moving towards hybrid fleets. This is one thing you're going to lower those carbon emissions. One of the things nobody talks about that's the biggest cause is air traffic. We get 660,000 flights a year coming in SeaTac, and that number is going to double in the next 20 years. However, there are the possibilities. There are new electric airplanes that are being developed. That's not necessarily the complete answer, and it's not something that our council can do. But what we need to do is we need to find ways to lower that footprint. One of them is making sure that our green spaces are taken care of, that we plant more trees. We don't let MHA come along and say you can just tear trees out wherever you want when you're building new affordable housing, and we lose that canopy. You can't do that. Terminal 5, one of the things we need to work on is when ships are there is have them plug into shore power so it's electric, so they're not just running their engines. We need to look at all of the different ways that we have these carbon emissions that we can lower. And like I said, it's hybrid engines, it's better stewardship of our green, green spaces and the open spaces, but also it's just paying attention to what's coming down the line. I mean, this is obviously something that everybody's paying attention to. All around the world, scientists are looking at the ways that we can lower our carbon footprint and that we can deal with this so that we can be more sustainable. And so we have to have our eyes towards that. We have to be able to have partnerships with some of the incredible companies that we've got here in Seattle that work on these things so that we can jump on them as soon as it's possible. It's green sustainable building, it's what we use for power in our buildings downtown. There are just a lot of different things that we need to keep our eyes open and make sure that we embrace the technologies when they come along.
Thank you. We in Seattle are very blessed to have a number of brilliant minds and strong universities and scholarship. We can do more to partner with our local researchers, including at the University of Washington, to identify ways to use renewable energies. I was reading yesterday about the vast potential within the Puget Sound to create renewable energies. I'm not aware of how we're really tapping into that right now, but that's something we can certainly go for. Also, I think we need to institute a program to incentivize businesses in Seattle to aim for carbon neutrality. This is something a lot of universities across the country are almost in an arms race to achieve. Part of this, the way I see it, would be a carbon offset program that would actually provide funds for businesses to offset their carbon that exceeds neutrality into a fund that homeowners could use to install solar panels and perhaps other improvements that would reduce the carbon footprint of their home, which is another step that we can take.
I love that we're talking about the environment. During the last forum and debate, I talked about us moving towards electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles. I talked about energy management systems, especially for businesses, to manage their energy consumption. We don't have to wait for Washington, D.C. to come up with the Green New Deal. We can actually come up with our own Evergreen Deal. We can actually require, I want us to require and become leaders in energy consumption. In the future, I envision that all new building where residents are require solar panels, that they feed back into the system. We do have a carbon neutral system. We have one coal power plant left, but our energy is clean. Let's become exporters of it. Let's continuously add energy to the system that comes from seeing we can use the current technologies we have to continue to be the leaders in the United States on this issue.
So I understood the question to focus on our transportation contribution to climate change and the fact that actually just found out 66% of our transportation emissions contribute to climate change. And so as the chair of the council's Public Utilities Committee, I led the council on moving our fleet, our garbage and recycling truck fleet to electric, and we are one of the few cities in the nation that's working towards that. I also believe that we need to make sure that we're investing our transportation dollars in a way that reduces emissions. So I worked on the ground with residents in Highland Park to increase funding for the 131, in Delridge to increase funding for the 120, and in Admiral to increase funding for the 56. We have huge increases in bus commuting, and that is really an important way to move us forward. We also need to not invest in what I call the shopping shuttle, because the trolley, the First Avenue trolley, is not going to do anything to invest our dollars into getting people out of cars and into buses.
One of the things that we need to be able to do to look at in terms of transportation and carbon emissions is what happens down in the port. I've recently been talking to a lot of people who are in the trucking industry, and one of the things you have happen is you get these lineups of 18-wheelers that are picking up the cargo, and they're literally sitting there with their engine running for hours and hours. In fact, one of the people I was talking to, they've got about 11,000 drivers across the country, and he was telling me that there are times where they will sit there with their engine running for 6 hours because of the time it's taking to actually get through the port, to be able to get their load and get out of there. And it's things like that that are unseen by us on a day-to-day basis that we need to pay attention to, and that only comes from talking to all the different people in the city, making sure you understand what's happening with transportation, what's happening with, municipal vehicles, and paying attention and making sure that we do listen to the voices that are coming from science and talking about the things we do, but we can't overlook the things we don't see.
Follow-up question begins with Jesse Green. Let's say that the city has decided to partner with all the universities in the city to develop a renewable energy program that does incentivize to achieve carbon neutrality. How would this be accomplished when we have seen at the state level the number of difficulties they've had with this?
I am really happy that in Seattle, we do have a population that really loves this issue. That for us, we have the beauty of the Puget Sound, we have the beauty of our skies, and we ourselves want to manage our carbon neutrality. We continuously dump more and more carbon in the air, and so if Seattle were to make that decision, which I wish we already had made that decision, that we would ourselves all support it and all understand that This isn't going to be free. We all do need to sacrifice. Some of this is in messaging. It's in the messaging that it's not just for us today, but it's for our kids. These are the types of things that we have to support as a city. We should be better than what we are. We should be the leaders here in Seattle because we have the public will. I think we have the public support, and we can lead. So hopefully the state makes a decision that we can actually go and combat this issue and start going towards carbon neutrality.
So the city actually does work on getting what are called transportation management plans with our large institutions. We use the master plan process where we extract commitments from large institutions to do things within their large institutions, whether or not it's for their students or their employees or both, to minimize the transportation impacts of their footprint. And so through transportation management plans, we require universities to make transit available and less expensive, requiring passes, and there are a lot of ability to use that mechanism.
One benefit the city has is on the state level, you're dealing with so many legislators who have so many different forces pulling them in different directions, especially from a lobbying standpoint. In the city, we've got the benefit of a mayor and a 9-person city council that can much more easily get on the same page. And luckily, we do have one of the most progressive green cities in the world. And I love that about that. And I think being able to get the council and the mayor behind these types of programs that will lower our carbon emissions, get to carbon neutrality, we can work with the city to do it.
Thank you. The way I understood the question was how could we expect a partnership with research universities to yield better results than the state has seen? And the answer is just that. If we partner with scholars, if we have grad students spending their 7 years at the UW working on this, we'll get better results. I don't think the state has really made efforts in that respect. What I'm talking about is leveraging the mind power and the resources and the academic talent we have in this city to take a different approach to solve this problem.
For me, it's going to be short. The question is, are we there? Have we already done enough? Do we need leadership that will actually push this? We continuously do hear that we're working on it, or we are being effective because we are spending money on it. But are we getting the results? Are we at carbon neutral right now? And do we have the possibility of making this an actual priority of the city council right now by putting our political will into one of the most pressing issues of our entire lifetime?
Question 5 is on homelessness, and we'll go to Brandon Golden. In a Seattle Times report, 15 of the 25 enhanced shelters contracted by Seattle ended 2018 short of their performance goals. Several of them missed their goals all 4 quarters of 2018. Even if shelters miss their performance goals, they can maintain their funding if they participate in a performance improvement review. What would you do to ensure shelters and other programs meet their goals, and how would you hold them accountable when their goals are missed?
Thank you. So the question is, how would I hold shelters accountable to meeting their goals? You need to first set the goals, establish what they are. You need to make sure they're realistic, and you need to work with them hand in hand as they're receiving clients, as they're receiving city resources, and make sure they don't fall behind. What I liked the most about that Times article was it basically said that they're falling a little short. They're doing better than they have been, but we will continue to work with them. And that's what we need to do. A lot of people ask me how I envision a shelter system working. Does it involve giving people 3 days, 30 days, 90 days, what have you? And my continued response is they need to stick with the plan, accept the services, work to achieve their goals, and if it takes a day, it takes a day. If it takes longer, but they're making good progress, they're making an earnest effort to elevate themselves into a stable lifestyle, into a dignified lifestyle, then we can continue to work with them. So as far as the shelters go, what we need to do is break out of our current cycle of the homeless industrial complex, where we're wasting money in an opaque fashion that isn't working, that isn't elevating people. Our encampments, our tiny villages, our current contracts that were not the elevated shelters that we discussed in this question are failing. We need to divert resources away from there and to where they're actually going to work. As long as our service providers, our contractors are making an earnest effort and working with us, and there's transparency, then we can continue to work with them and really make sure we don't fall behind at all. I think that's the biggest point, is keep things transparent, work with them hand in hand, make sure they're meeting their goals, and as long as we're not falling behind, as long as we're continuing to make progress in this matter, we can continue to provide the funds.
The city's responsibility when it comes to funding these shelters is to create homes for the individuals that are locked out of there. How you hold accountable in that has to do with transparency, but there is an accountability piece. If we cannot get them to continuously improve and start hitting their goals, we need to incentivize them to do just that. And I'm not saying we cut all of the funding for the program, but we need to reassess and use our resources, our precious resources that we don't have enough of, towards programs that work, towards shelters that work. We need to hold all of our service providers accountable. We need to understand that they are using these resources that are precious. This isn't revenue. This is our tax money. This is our resource saying, we're done with this. We cannot have our response to homelessness that we have now. We need to be better at making impact.
So the legislation requiring the Human Services Department to make sure that all of its contracts are contracts that are based on results-based accountability was my bill. That was my legislation. I sponsored it. I authored it. And I'm really committed to seeing the Human Service Department use it. I'm really happy to hear folks recognize the fact that we are moving more people faster than ever before out of homelessness into housing, and that outcomes are improving. They're improving because the Human Services Department is using these plans, these improvement plans with agencies, but we also have to look at what our goals are. One of the recommendations of the Poppe report is to focus on housing the hardest to house first. And for those folks, we need to really make sure that our goals are aligned with what's reality and what our priority is, because sometimes the hardest to house are the ones that you see the outcomes that take the longest. And as it relates to tiny villages, 35% moving out of homelessness into permanent housing.
I found fascinating that in that report it actually talked about the fact that the city was going to lower the sanctions against the enhanced shelters that were not providing their proper outcomes so that they could meet them better. Once again, this is our city not holding people accountable for not getting the job done. For the people that I've talked to at the Department of Human Services, it's simple. We'll have providers that do not get the job done, they do not meet their goals, they get their funding cut, and then the people that run those operations go around the back of the Department of Human Services back to the council, and the council turns their funding back on. This is the same thing that happened last year when the council said they were going to cut funding to these services if they didn't show their goals, and then they turned around and turned it back on because they said it's a crisis and we can't do it now. We need true transparency, which is, what are the goals? What are the measurables? And if you don't meet them, you don't get money. It is very simple. We have a limited amount of resources to solve this problem, and we're not going to solve it if we're being so lenient with service providers that don't get the job done.
Thank you. I would like to call out that there's a very sensitive issue here. If we talk about cutting funding to service providers, we also need to have somebody providing these services. So my emphasis is on continuing to work with these providers. If they're failing to meet the standards, we need to find an alternative, but we also need to make sure we're doing our best to house people. For the longest time in this city, we've instituted a term that I learned from somebody else earlier this week called the policy of false compassion. We're allowing people to live on the streets, in the mud, in our parks, in situations that are unsafe, they're undignified, they're creating public health hazards. There was recently a Times article about how there's an HIV epidemic, which is related to some of these issues. We are in crisis here. We are in absolute crisis. We can't deny it. We need to get people into transitional housing as soon as we can, and then connect them with services and support programs to get them into permanent housing and to increase their quality of life.
The follow-up will go to Councilmember Herbal. We heard a few notes about incentives to promote progress. What incentives do you believe will address the shortfalls most effectively?
So one of the examples that we heard earlier related to an organization that had actually been exceeding its goals for outcomes to housing, but was not meeting its goals for what's called data completeness. They weren't collecting information from all of the folks who were using their shelter. And so the city made, I think, the wise choice to use a 6-month contract to incentivize better data completeness. So the shelter system referred to, again, actually had better outcomes than other shelters for moving people out of homelessness and into housing. But the problem was the data completeness. There weren't enough people who were providing the information, and the city, again, they used a 6-month contract to get the provider to agree to a performance improvement plan. And that's an example, I think, of a really effective incentive. And as a result, the contract was, the Human Services Department made the decision to extend the contract for the full year. One of the other, I think, really important points that we have to underscore here is that, again, the goals that we set have to be well aligned with our objectives. And that is something that the city, the Human Services Department is continuing to work on, but results-based accountability is relatively new, and it's a work in progress.
At this point, when you've got a crisis, it's not about incentivizing, it's about disincentives. It's very simple. We are 15 years into the process of the 10-year fight against homelessness that was announced by the county in 2005, and we are clearly not out of it. So it is simple. If you are a provider that is supposed to provide shelters, transition people into housing, help with mental health issues or substance abuse issues, if you are not meeting your goals, you don't get more money and someone else steps up.
Thank you. I think key to the issue of how to incentivize these providers is to make sure we're contracting with the right people. We want to make sure that people are not incentivized to just make money, make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year off of the homeless industrial complex. There has to be a way to contract with people who will take a reasonable amount of money for doing a good job, but not rely on people remaining homeless to get their money. That's a large part of how we're in our situation today. There's people who make money off of people remaining homeless.
I'm in this race really because of homelessness. We need someone who has experienced homelessness, that has been appointed to be an advisor on a statewide level basis on homelessness. Our response has not been effective. We can tout the improvements, but this is not compassion what we're seeing. What we see out there is not acceptable. We need individualized approach that doesn't just go after the hardest to house people, but the people that we can make impact, the people that will accept the help, to help the individuals from staying out of the other dangers of being homeless.
So just a couple points here. I really have to speak out against the notion that there are people making money off of homelessness. Many of our service providers, the vast majority of our service providers, are actually recipients of public funding in order to get by. They are recipients of rent assistance and food assistance programs. Secondly, it's really important to recognize that we are not allowing people to stay outside. People are living outside, but I can show you on the city's website right now a list of all of the encampments that are removed every week. We remove between 6 to 12 encampments in this city every week. Limited resources.
final question is on taxation, and it goes to Jesse Green. Every dollar the city spends is a tax dollar. To solve the problem our city is facing, you, as a council member, would need to decide how to collect and spend those dollars. If elected, what would your top 3 priorities be for the next 4 years? Describe how you would bring in the revenue necessary to implement the programs vital to our city's prosperity.
Being pragmatic about the way we raise our revenue or our tax income, that would be our number 1 priority. We need to ensure that we're not spending money on programs like bailing out the bike share system. We need to ensure that we're being accountable, we're holding people accountable by the way they spend our money. And that includes the issue I care about most with homelessness. We need to ensure that the money that we collect, we are good stewards of where it comes from and how we spend it. Again, we went from $2.9 billion in 2011 in tax collected or revenue to $5.9 billion this year in 2019. So in 8 years, our population hasn't doubled. Has our services doubled? I don't feel like we've gotten twice as good. So how are we being good stewards of the money that we have collected? We need to be pragmatic and really dig in and understand that we are using the money effectively, that this money doesn't just come from somewhere. This is the taxpayer money that we need to make this city beautiful. Going back to the core drivers of what we need cities for. We need public safety. We need transportation. We need to ensure that we have jobs, and we need to ensure that all are welcome within our community. And so when we talk about taxation, we need to set priorities to, are we collecting the money from the right people? Are we making impact and ensuring that we're not passing soda taxes that disproportionately impact minorities and disproportionately impact people on the fringes? We need to collect money from the right people and ensure it goes to the people without voices. But we need to get away from this just free spending and the huge increase of revenue, because we're pricing out people that we need in our city, because all of our people, that's why we're a beautiful place.
So we have to keep in mind that we don't even see in Seattle 75% of our property taxes. Only 25% comes to Seattle. In our budget, we spend 55% of it on public safety. I support continued majority funding from our budget for public safety. And the other thing to keep in mind is actually in Seattle, average property taxes have gone down $86, it's not a lot, $86 from last year. And when compared to other King County cities, I can show you the data. When compared to other King County cities, we are below the average. There are more than half of King County cities, 25 cities, have average property tax bills higher than ours. And I don't say that to suggest that property taxes aren't an important issue and don't make this city unaffordable. But I say it to, again, point out the fact that this is happening in a larger context. It's not just Seattle that is unaffordable. It is other cities in King County, and it is because of the basic unfairness of our tax system. We are a city in a state full of other cities and counties that has a regressive taxation system. And what that means is the people with the highest incomes are paying the least as a proportion of their income. As far as what I feel are the priorities for our tax dollars here in Seattle, as I mentioned, I continue to support the majority of our tax dollars going to pay for public safety. Public safety is by our charter, our most fundamental obligation as city government. But I also want to see the city do more as commitments towards affordable housing. I don't believe that our city, although the taxpayers are very generous in funding a housing levy, the dollars going out the door this year are half as much as they have been in past years, and I think the city really needs to look at using our bond authority to pay for additional housing like we use our bond authority for other things.
You can't tell me at $5.9 billion a year in tax revenue that we cannot use those resources better to pay for the services we need. It is simple. The first thing I do in office is I call for an audit. I call for an audit of SDOT and I call for an audit of the utilities, because it has been a long time since we had people go in and actually take a look at the inefficiencies that exist in these systems. The conversations that I've been having with people in departments all across the city, they all say the same thing. SDOT wastes money, that the utilities are wasting money. And I'm not saying it's egregious and horrible, but we've reached a point where we're generating enough tax revenue to be able to pay for this stuff, but we're not understanding what we're getting for the money we're spending. So quite simply, we have to take a kind of business approach to the fact that with $6 billion, let's see what we're spending. What are we getting? Because I don't know. You know, for example, we legalized marijuana. How much have we taken in? What have we done with that? I've asked a lot of people, I haven't seen it. You know, and in general, when you look at this, we do need to put our money in a better place, but it's about marshaling the incredible resources that we have. On top of that, we've got to look at public-private partnerships. We do too much demonizing of the businesses in this city instead of working with them. We have companies that are affecting incredible change all over the planet, but we're not seeing it here. And it's not just about hitting them with a head tax and telling them they have to pay more. It's actually going to them and saying, look, we have a crisis. We need to do things. You can help us. We can work with you. The whole point in a city is to be supportive. It's to enhance prosperity. And we can do that, but in general, one of those business principles out there is if you can measure it, you can manage it. And I don't think we've got a clue what we're measuring, and if we don't do that, we can't manage it.
Thank you. I think in many ways, we're at a watershed moment in the city of Seattle. We've got crises, we've got a lot of different things going on, which is why you have so many people putting their name forward to run for city council. I think one of the decisions we need to make as a city, as much as we talk about affordability and accessibility, is are we really about affordability or are we about spending money wastefully? And I worked for the city for over 10 years and I can tell you we don't spend money efficiently. It's just, money just flows out like a sieve. It's embarrassing. We need an audit. We need a top-down review of our finances. We need to learn to live within our existing means, within our resources, as we budget, as we spend money, and we need to figure out how to make that work. We really have a very limited ability, despite the fact that, yes, academically, we do have a regressive tax structure. State law has kind of painted us into that corner. Unless the legislature changes something about both income tax and excise tax, we have a very limited ability to do something else with that. We've seen how damaging the head tax was. We all know what Amazon's reaction has been to that. That's money going out the door. If they continue to leave, we lose revenue. We need to value our private sector partners. We need to value the citizens who pay these taxes. And we need to see ourselves as being responsible stewards of taxpayer resources. I truly believe that's what it all comes down to. I honestly believe we have the means within the city, within our budget, our current finances, to institute the programs that we need to do to support the homeless and to live without needing to seek additional means of income. Towards that end, we do need transparency. There's a lot of opacity. We need to switch that. We need transparency. We really need a new set of eyes. And that's part of why it's very exciting that we're going to have 7 council seats on the ballot in August and in November, is we can get people with fresh ideas to come in and take over this ship.
We are talking about that we need to be accountable for the money that's spent at different programs. But we need to hold our city council accountable for every time that it has wasted money. During our first debate, I talked about this exact issue, that it was against the state constitution, and it was brought up that we needed to challenge it. Well, in 2014, we just found out from the Seattle Times, Nick Licata's office was notified by the city attorney that it was against state constitution and it would not go through. But the city council decided to push on anyway in 2017. How much money do we waste every time we do one of these things? We cannot be wasteful stewards of the money. We need to understand, this is why we need somebody with real business experience that understands macro and microeconomic policy and why you can't pass macroeconomic policy on a city level basis. We need to be understanding that this is tax money. Every single person in here has added to that pot. It's come out of all of our pockets. If you feel that the city has been good stewards, I mean, I'm just going to bow down to you because I don't know how you come to that conclusion. For me, we need to be more pragmatic. We need to hold our current city council accountable and say, it's not okay. The way that we have spent money, we need to change our philosophy and we need to change our approach. Let's focus on the core responsibilities of the city. Let's go back to being pragmatic about the way that we tax and what we spend our tax money on.
The follow-up question starts with Phil Tapper. It says, how do we raise, lower, collect taxes and be mindful of our vulnerable population, yet work to ensure that those who should be paying a higher tax based on their income do?
Well, obviously, right now the issue of income tax is with the appellate court. So, that's one of the things that we potentially could do down the road, but it depends on what we get back from that. And in general, right now, we do not need to raise any more taxes. I mean, we all see the impact of that across the board. It's property taxes, it was the soda tax, it's whatever it is. There's always a new tax to throw out, which is why I was saying a minute ago, it's got to be about fiscal responsibility. It can't just be about taxing. Like, that is just one method that the government brings in its money, and it can't always answer questions that way. I mean, it's about inefficiency. We've reached a point where we just need to take a breath, and we need to say, look, the job of a city is to effectively and efficiently deliver services in an equitable fashion to the people that live here. It is just about doing that. And again, at $6 billion a year, we've got the revenue to take care of 800,000 people, but we can only do it if we understand what we're spending, what the metrics are that we're deciding are going to be able to evaluate whether or not people have reached their performance, exceeded it, or have not yet even reached what they're supposed to do. Again, we need to go back to the basics and just get running a city properly for the people who live here to keep it safe and efficient.
Thank you. So state law currently prohibits a graduated tax structure, and it prohibits cities from imposing a net income tax. So as I understand the question, it appears to be, how do we get people who make more money to spend more on taxes? Narrowly construed, and in order to answer that question, you have to inspire them to want to spend money in your city. You have to have a downtown that's walkable, that's safe, that isn't intimidating. You have to have them believe they're treated fairly with their property taxes. And I'm out of time.
Taxing the most vulnerable is not acceptable. We can say that we have a not fair tax system, but every time the city council raises parking fees, every time the city council passes things like the soda tax, every time the city council makes it more expensive, people that are the most vulnerable, people on fixed incomes, can't afford to live here. You can say all you want that we have a messed up system, but we need to be good stewards and be responsible about the taxes as a city we decide to put on the people here to pay for the services that we need.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Colding, for recognizing that the income tax that the city passed was a tax on net income. The law department memo that you referenced was, our tax is on gross income. The law department memo that you referenced was on net income, so we took the law department's advice. We're going to be hearing oral arguments in early June, so hopefully we'll get some good news about that. And the first purpose in the legislation that enacted the income tax was to adjust the other regressive taxes, like your property taxes. So that is the first purpose should an income tax go into play.
It really, it continues on to what I was saying before. before, is that this is about marshaling the resources that we currently have. And if we do not do that, we will continue to fail. And there may be down the road ways to tax people who are earning higher. I know at the state level, they're looking at charging employers for the salaries that are $1 million and above. And there are potentially ways of doing that. But again, it is simple. We need to just understand how we spend our money that we have.
Thank you, everyone. Before we move on to closing statements, I just wanted to remind everyone in the audience that as you look at these candidates and you're deciding which one you are thinking about endorsing, in order to participate in our endorsement process, you have to become a member by May 8th. That's our next meeting. And you can certainly go online and get your membership as well. And that's to participate in our endorsement meeting that happens June 12th. So remember that the deadline is May 8th. You can certainly go online to get your membership. So we'll move, at 34thDIMS.org. Yes, that's really important. Yes. So we'll move on to closing statements. Lisa.
Thank you. So one of the things that we didn't talk about today, that I really spend a lot of my time in my office working on is constituent services. I really believe that the responsibility of a district council member is to make sure that the nuts and bolts of city government is working for you to make your communities a better place. So I spend a lot of time doing things like getting streetlights fixed, getting equipment in parks fixed, getting potholes filled. This is really, I think, an important function of our district council members, because I believe that in seeing how we can work for you on the small issues, we can better work on the big issues. I also want to just share with you that I have the endorsement of Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, Councilmember Lorena Gonzalez, and our State Senator Joe Nguyen. I also have the endorsement of King County MLK Labor, as well as the Iron Workers and a number of other unions, and I hope to gain your support as well. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight.
This election is about finding a representative to sit on a group of 9 people that oversee a $6 billion budget and take care of the 800,000 people that live in Seattle, and especially for this, the 110,000 that live here in District 1. I have a background as a physics teacher. I worked for the National Science Foundation as a science education analyst. I am a stat junkie. I love data and I love analytics, and we need to understand the numbers to understand how this city is run. I've been a public defender for 15 years and a pro tem district court judge. The issues we face are not with just policing, not with just fire, it's the criminal justice system, and we need someone who understands it, who has worked on all sides of it, and who can help fix it. I have been a business owner. I owned a video game company in Pioneer Square, and I owned a large retail store when I lived in Australia. We need someone who understands business and the bottom of the line and can talk to people. And I am endorsed by the businesses we know in this district, and I can get the job done. My name is Philip Tavel, and I ask for your vote and your support.
Thank you. I'd like to follow up on a comment Councilmember Herbold made about I-940 real briefly. I-940 was sold to the public as a training bill. It was not a training bill. Yes, it did pass with 70% of the vote in King County. The motivation by the people who wrote it was to make it easier to prosecute officers for use of force decisions that are necessarily made in circumstances that are tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving. That's Graham v. Conner, 1989 U.S. Supreme Court. I could talk about that all night if you'd like to discuss it after the event or online later or in some other fashion. I'd be happy to do that. I know these issues very well. I worked for the SPD for 10 years. I worked in policy development during the consent decree. I've been in these meetings. I've been a trainer. I've studied case law. I've taught a lot of different classes. I actually taught criminal justice and political science at a local university for a period of time. I believe what I bring is that level of experience with a lot of the key important issues in the city these days. My name is Brendan Colding, and I would also very much appreciate your vote. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you to the 34th and for everyone being here today. I'm here to tell you, again, reference back to my bad joke on why you should vote for the popcorn guy. The popcorn guy never saw himself as this. When I was homeless, when I was a youth, I never envisioned that I would be the first one in my family to go to college. I never envisioned that I would open and run multiple small businesses. I never envisioned that Governor Jay Inslee would appoint me to the State Advisory Council of Homelessness so I can make an impact in the community that I think is most vulnerable. I really appreciate the opportunity to be up here and for everyone to put in their 2 cents on what they believe is the right answer for the city. And I want to ask all of you, what type of experience do you want from an individual that represents you in City Hall? Again, my name's Jesse Green. I ask you all for your support, and thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thank you, candidates, for your participation, and thank you all for your time. Thank you, Holy Family, for providing this space, and thank you, volunteers, for all of your help. As we pack up our tables and chairs, please take your time to speak with the candidates, stop by their tables in the back. However, we do need to be out of here by 9 p.m. Thank you all for coming, and good night.